everyone. I'm Matt Wagner, Chief Program Officer at Main Street America and host of the Main Street Business Inside podcast. Thanks for joining as we explore the personal journeys of small business owners, offering their personal perspectives, lessons learned, and of course, sharing their wisdom on operating and succeeding on our main streets. We had two primary purposes when we started in the show. And one was to tell the stories that are really inspirational and important. And as we like to say on the podcast, that far too often go untold and unheard. And secondly, it was really to illuminate the incredible intersections of small businesses and artwork as place professionals. Today's guest personifies what our show inspired to do. But before we get to the guest, for a second year in a row, this is kind of cool, we're recording in front of an audience at our Main Street Now conference this year in Birmingham, Alabama, which I really enjoy as we have this opportunity to not only engage with the guest, of course, but to engage with all of you. And so as you're going through, as I start asking questions and we start having our chat, I hope you'll start thinking about questions that you might want to learn as we go through our podcast today. If my voice sounds a little bit different than maybe what you're used to, it is not because we have great editing on the back end. It's just because after, I think, 5 days, I've spoken more than maybe 5 months in total, and it's starting to go, I think, a little bit. Or it's sounding deeper or huskier or something, I don't know. Okay, normally I would jump right into the questions, but just by way of a little bit of background, what we tend to do is record our intro and outro essentially after the podcast, okay? But we're gonna run this a little bit differently, and as I'm doing somewhat a blended intro, and then we'll leap into our questions with the guest. Our guest today is Alycia Levels-Moore. She's the owner and founder of POLARIS, which is a co-work space and entrepreneurial event center in the Woodlawn neighborhood of Birmingham, Alabama. She's also one of the leaders in our Main Street America work in partnership with Living Cities on the Breaking Barriers to Business entrepreneurial ecosystem work supported by the Truist Bank Foundation and working in 5 cities and 15 neighborhoods. And if you thought that was a lot, okay, take a deep breath here. Alicia is also an amazing and busy family life as a wife and mother of 4. And also, she's not gonna do it, folks. I already tried. She's an amazing singer, okay? We're not gonna get that. That's a separate podcast, totally different venue. So Alicia, in very many ways, personifies what we're trying to do and aspire to do with the podcast and what it means to be a Main Street business owner. So with that, please join me in welcoming Alicia to the show. You can clap. All right, so we're gonna dive in. If you've listened to the podcast in the past, you know I like to always ask about their journey. What's the story like? And so that's where we're gonna get started. Let's hear about Alicia's story and her journey to small business ownership.
Yes. Well, good morning, everyone. Or yes, it's morning time. I'm like a little delusional. So good morning. I was born in upstate New York. I was raised in East Atlanta. I attended Tuskegee University, and that's where I met my husband. And he's from Birmingham. And so he said, hey, I think we should move to Birmingham. He had been volunteering in a community, Woodlawn. I'm at the high school doing a lot of work. And so me not knowing anything about Birmingham, anything about Woodlawn, it's an amazing community. At the time, 10, 11 years ago, it was very much in transition. It's not the Woodlawn we know now. So I packed my bags and I got there and I was like, oh, okay. Right? And so I was like, yeah, all right. But my thought process when I do anything is, how can I make sure that whatever I'm a part of, it's better once I'm finished with it? So, you know, he was heavily involved in civic engagement, and I jumped right in with supporting our small business owners and got involved with the organization doing some urban Maine work. And coordinating porch parties and really figuring out how do we nurture our community-based ecosystem of entrepreneurs. And my natural matriculation in doing that work was like, well, hey, there's no spaces. Where are people meeting? Where are they gathering? Where are they ideating, right? And so I saw a building in my community. It had been vacant for about 3 years, and I just thought it was cute. And I didn't have any money, so I walked in. I called the property manager, and I was like, hey, I want to take a look. And every week I would come in with an interior designer, a contractor, and he was like, ma'am, if you come in here one more day without putting a deposit down, I'm going to call the cops on you. You know, and
it sounds like you had moved in already.
Yes, I mean, in my mind, right? Because I'm a crazy woman like that. Like, the moment I see a vision, it's really nothing else to talk about. And so, you know, I brought all the folks in, and, you know, we were able to lease the space from the property owner and begin kind of, you know, building out Polaris, which is our community-based co-working space. But really, for me, it is an educational hub, and that's really the hope and goal for what we do.
Excellent, excellent. When we talked before in the past, you know, your vision around Polaris that you articulated to me was really about building community. And I think that's an interesting sort of component that you hear from a lot of small business owners, that it's hard to talk with them and where they don't mention community. It's sort of like what separates, I think, a lot of Main Street businesses from other businesses. Could you talk about what does that mean to you in the context of the work that you do at Polaris? Why is community so important to this work?
I think when we think about community, it means acceptance. It means belonging, and where you feel accepted and where you feel like you belong, you thrive, right? There's safety there. And so it's important, because when we think about nurturing the gifts and the talents and the ideas of folks who have not been invested in, right? Or have not been exposed to certain things based on whatever the circumstances, in order for you to really thrive in your creativity and all that you can offer, you have to feel safe. You have to know that you belong. And I think, you know, when you kind of look at the word, community is really just communing in unity, right? Like, how can we commune in unity? And so I think providing space for people, a safe space for people, was really important to me, because I knew that if it wasn't safe, no matter what your mission statement is, you're not going to accomplish it. Because people can feel inauthenticity a mile away, right? When something's inauthentic. And so it was important to really nurture a space of safety and community, so that we could build trust and that we could really help to get some of these ideas out of people's heads and into the world.
Wonderful. You and your husband are very active in the Birmingham area,
Yes.
And I'm sort of interested in, is capital is mobile. You certainly had many different parts of Birmingham where you could have built Polaris. What was it about Woodlawn, the place, that attracted you so much?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about my story is, you know, I live on the main street, right? I have a building in the main, so everything about what we do centers around our community. So my husband, he's a public servant, but his work revolves around our community. So, you know, I'm raising 4 children somewhere, and if I'm gonna do anything, it's gonna be right in my neighborhood. Because that's how you add value, right? So I want the kids, when they're walking home from school or walking to school, they see folks in their community working, right? I want people who are in the community to know that there's a safe place for me to go, to tinker, to think, to ideate, and even to fail and get back up, but it's okay. You know, so it was just important to me to start it right in my neighborhood. On top of that, it's up the street. So I can always just get in the car and drive 2 minutes away if anything is ever going on. And then you have neighbors and other business owners who are around you who can say, hey, you know, make sure the lights off. Like, hey, I took your trash out. And so, you know, it's a benefit in building in community with other folks.
Excellent. We're going to talk a little bit about that support system, but one of the themes that continues to come up in our conversations, especially in kind of like a post-pandemic, post-COVID world, is kind of the mental aspect of running a business. And you've been engaged for a number of years in kind of both sides of running and owning a business, but also as a technical assistance provider. And, you know, in many respects, that's not the kind of thing that is part of some sort of like small business or entrepreneurial curriculum, is the mental aspect,
Yes.
the mental health aspect of running a business. We'll teach you about your finances and how to network and build relationships. And so I'm sort of curious, in your role at Polaris, is how do you approach issues of mental health and loneliness among entrepreneurs in this sort of new world? And what strategies do you implement to sort of combat these challenges?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I'm going to touch on it from 2 different ways. So one, you talked about just kind of, there's a mindset thing, and then there's like mental health. So I think, and then there's another component to it as well, because you made mention of being like a technical assistance practitioner. I think you have a lot of folks who are working with businesses, but they don't understand what it feels like to be a business owner. So they're supporting and teaching all from theory. And so I think that's a great opportunity for me, is when I'm talking to a business owner, I'm working with them, I'm like, no, I know that you want to cry, right? Like, here's a shoulder. I know what's going on. I know it's time to meet overhead, and this person, they said they were going to do this, right? And so I think there's an ability to relate to people in a very special way, because you understand the journey. Because it does take a certain level of resilience and mental fortitude to do anything that's risky, right? It is a scary thing. I remember probably a couple days before we opened Polaris, that we have a LED sign. I had to go pick it up. It was like $750. And I mean, I'm looking at my credit card statement, and I just burst out crying in the parking lot. I mean, like hard tears. Like, you know, like you can't really see. It's a little snot, you know, it's not too cute. And, you know, I'm like,
everyone has an image right
now. You know, I'm bawling, because I'm like, what am I doing? I think I'm a psychopath. Like, you know, I think when, you know, entrepreneurship, it does cause you to have to operate at a small level of delusion, because you have to believe what no one else believes. You have to see what no one else sees, right? And you have to really find it within yourself. Because even I had people around me who love me dearly, and they're like, I don't think this is a good idea. Like, you just had a kid, right? So I was on like baby number 3. You know, and baby number 3 was like 6 weeks old, you know, so, and they were like, you know, I think it's a good idea, but I don't know if it's now the time, you know. And so you have to be able to encourage yourself. But in terms of the mental health aspect, it goes back to the resilience, it goes back to the fortitude, and it goes back to having people around you where you can say, okay, like business owners who get it, hey, is this okay? So I had a friend, I have a friend in Inglewood. So he opened a co-working space in Inglewood, California. And I remember when I was getting ready to press purchase on all of the furniture with the MasterCard. And I was like, I think this might be a bad idea for my credit score. And, you know, I called him. He was like, hit it now. Do it now. You have to do it. Right? So I had somebody to kind of talk me into doing the things I needed to do, because again, when you're walking somewhere you've never been, you need some folks who have been there. And that was really helpful for me, because it alleviated some of the anxiety, some of the stress around knowing that this is just what comes with business ownership. But I think therapy is important. I go to therapy 2 times a month, right? Because I know I need an outlet. My friends are great, my husband's great, but I need other outlets to make sure I have a space to talk through things, to work through things. Fridays, I don't do a whole lot. That's the day for me to just walk around Hobby Lobby and have a good time and look at everything that's 40% off, you know, the spring section, you know, but doing things that don't require productivity. So I think you have to build in that time. After 6 o'clock, I don't answer my phone. I'm not responding to an email, because nothing is the end of the world except the end of the world. And so we're not quite there yet. And so, you know, I'm like, hey, I'm not doing it, because I know, too, it's time for me to take off one hat and put on another, which is to make sure that my kids have my full attention, right? And so not letting the work consume you. I'm a woman of faith, and so I understand that everything is not within my control. Everything I can, as smart as I am, as much as I can work, I can't will it enough, right? I will run myself ragged, and I like to look good, so it's important. You know, it's a real thing, you know. So, you know, I don't want to run myself ragged. I don't want to look like what it takes, right? And so I think kind of what are some boundaries you can set for yourself, and you make other people respect those boundaries as well, and then it becomes a part of your culture. So people know if they don't hear from me after 6 or 7, like, there's no offense. They understand.
I'm sitting here in total awe of that that response. So let's make sure we clip this out as its own segment. That was completely powerful. I'm struck by the response, but then at the same time, I'm also thinking about perhaps the entrepreneurs that don't have that existing network or aren't sure how to build those connections that ultimately, to your point, are so incredibly important to just getting started, to pressing the button. Mm-hmm. And so what do you advise when you're in Polaris and new folks are coming in with their ideas? How do you get them to that point where they've got their support system?
Yeah, I think I made mention of this in a session during the conference yesterday. It really, one of the things we try to do at Polaris is build a culture of that, right? So sometimes I'm there, and if we do a good job at knowing who's in the building, who's connecting with us online or in person, and for lack of better words, if someone tells me what they want to do, like, they kind of are nervous to see me again if they haven't started to do it, right? Because I'm like kicking you in the back. Like I'm texting you like, okay, so you don't want to do nothing. Okay, that's fine. I mean, you just want to be regular, and so, it's like, because sometimes you need someone to push you, right? Because I think that we get so comfortable, like just in our comfort zone. And then what happens though is for me, I think about my life and I said, hey, I don't ever want to be a person that was like, I could have done, I should have done, I would have done. The person you kind of talk to, or the family member that always talks about the past. At 75, when they ran their one play, you like, listen, it is 2024, right? But sometimes we can get stuck in time if we're not willing to push ourselves. And so for me, anybody who's around me, I mean, and hopefully this isn't like messing up the podcast, but like Chris, he's here. He can tell you firsthand, if you are going to do something, I'm going to push you to the very edge of yourself, but I'm going to be there to walk alongside you so you're not alone. And every resource that's available to me is now available to you because I'm just committed to people's success like that. And I think you have to be self-aware enough to know kind of what's your superpower,
I think you've got another 10 lines of business. So we were already ideating before the podcast started. So inspirational speaker, new slogans for t-shirts for Main Street. So you just want to be normal. We can go on, right? We've got like 5 new business concepts already started here. Let's switch gears a little bit because you wear another hat, and it's with my colleague Dion, who's in the crowd here, and our work with the Breaking Barriers to Business initiative, where we're working, as I mentioned earlier, on our entrepreneurial ecosystem work with Living Cities through the Truist Foundation, 5 cities, 15 neighborhoods. Could you share with the audience a little bit more about the kinds of experiences and insights you've gained by being engaged in this program effort, and what have you seen has been most challenging about working in new communities?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I want to shout out Dion for bringing me on to the project, because it has really been amazing to, when you're building your own community, you know what's around you. But when you get the opportunity to go to other cities and communities, you get a chance to really see what's happening on the ground. And the thing that I think that was important, and what my grandmother Maya Angelou used to tell me, she's really not my grandmother. But I think people like, oh my, this girl, no.
This was not in the background.
Crazy. No. But in my mind, she's my grandmother. And one of the things that I realized in doing the work in all these different cities is that we are more alike than we are different. And I see that we're all having very similar experiences. If you may be in a different geographical location, the political landscape may be a little different, but we're all grappling with the same thing. So I think that's one thing I was able to see. But I think in terms of the challenges with working with newer communities is helping them to organize themselves and believing that regardless of what has not been invested into you, regardless of who hasn't responded to your email, who has not paid attention, you can make them, because there's power with people, right? And so it's really helping them to organize themselves so that they can be their biggest advocates and their biggest cheerleaders for their quality of life, right? And so I think the biggest challenge, it kind of goes back to that mindset thing, helping people to get past all of the hurt and to be able to rise above so that they can really focus on what's important, which is a solution for their communities and for the quality of life for themselves and their families.
Excellent. I mean, you just highlighted the importance of Main Street, right? Capacity building, setting mindset, creating vision for the community. Given that we focus on the hyperlocal, and it would seem that most programming in small business support is often driven kind of like down, from city, regional, or even state institutions. And I'm wondering, what are some of the common disconnects that you find as an entrepreneur and as an owner of a business that supports other entrepreneurs in the programming? Are there disconnects between what we come up with and what really people need?
That's a good question. So yes, because I think sometimes you have organizations and cities, and in their minds, based on all their annual reports, they think that they're doing like everything. And it's, no shade to the annual report. I love a good annual report. However, I think that again, when you really get down to the heart of the people, to your point, seeing what is actually beneficial. And I think some of the disconnects is, one, we have a lot of programming. We're asking a lot from people who have a little bit of time, a little bit of capacity, and they are fighting for their lives in terms of revenue. So when you ask me to sign up for a 56-week incubator program, and it's like, we're gonna give you $500. It's like, seriously, get out of my face, right? Because you're like, hey, I have to open this building, I have to close this building, I have to cover overhead, I'm trying to, expand, I'm trying to do something with my facade, I'm navigating leases, and it's so many different things. So I think, one, how do we make sure that the programming that we offer is culturally competent, it's relevant, that it fits into the time and the capacity that business owners have, right? And I think, making sure that it's connected to some type of outcome and resource. Because I think, and this is just in all transparency, I think sometimes when we're looking at programs and the different organizations I've had a chance to work with and things I've seen, the outcomes are more so tailored to the organization, right? So when we're looking at our metrics, it's like, okay, we need to be able to report. We need, and it may not be exactly what that community needs. So then what happens is people feel slighted. They don't want to, I don't want to fool with you anymore, right? I don't want to go to your program. Don't come around here. No, I don't trust them. And that's one of the most important things in community building and the work that we do is trust, right? So if you give me a program, if you give me something and it's not really tailored or focused on what my needs are, but more so how can I meet your goals, you're going to have a hard time seeing true results. So I think the disconnect is really considering the capacity, the true outcomes that people need. And I think we also have to be agile in our programs, right? So we can create it, we're really smart, but then we have to be willing to pivot and adjust if needed and be able to articulate that to funders or articulate that to the team. Like, hey, if we're truly about impact, we have to be willing to be a little more agile in what we're offering.
Yeah, I think there's this sort of misconception, whether we know it or not, that small business owners and entrepreneurs are like robots, mm-hmm. and they're going to all respond in the same kind of way, and that everyone has time to commit and resources to commit.
Yes.
You mentioned a really important, I think, thought around metrics. And we've been having a lot of conversations around metrics and how we measure whether or not we're being successful. Mm-hmm. And could you talk a little bit about where you would like to see, what should we be measuring? What's really the true metric of success when it comes to supporting small businesses from your sense? That's
a good question. I'm going to answer, and I don't know if it would be like kind of data metrics, because I think sometimes it's tangible what I'm going to say, but sometimes there's certain things you have to find a new way to call it, or how you're going to measure
fit
it
into a certain box.
Yeah, so I think really being able to get real feedback from folks about their experience and taking it into consideration. So, for example, we have a pop-up retail kind of small-scale manufacturing space in Polaris. So, one of the ways I measure success is everything that they needed, because you can do an assessment before they come in. Everything that they needed, regardless of if it matches what I want or what I want to report or the stories or narratives I want to tell, was I able to check those boxes off? And then also, was I able to take a look at the things they didn't even know they needed, right? Because I think sometimes there's a disconnect, because some business owners, they are really just trying to operate their business and they're trying to make money and do the things that they love. And they don't know what they don't know, right? So if I'm working with someone who's doing retail and she has amazing product, but she has no clue about visual merchandising, it's my responsibility to say, hey, I see what you're doing, I think it's good, but let me offer you another suggestion. Let me connect you with this person, right? So measuring that based on the relationships we help them to build. Other things that we're able to expose them to that we may not have written in the program or they may not have asked. Because most entrepreneurs are going to say, give me some money, give me an attorney, and give me an accountant. And then sometimes you don't even know what to do with those folks. You don't know how to maximize those relationships, right? You don't know the questions to ask your accountant. So it's okay. We know that most of the time those things are going to come up. But as a practitioner, how can I expose you to other things you may not even be asking me about? How can I tap into my resources? How can I tap into my relationships and ensure that those relationships can influence your success, right? How you measure that, I don't know, but I think if someone's able to walk away and you see them better than where they started, that's something to use.
It's really the intangibles, and having a good understanding that there's not one journey or one pathway to success, and the intervention that you're doing to when they need it and helping them to sort of like understand what that need is invaluable. I'm going to ask one more question because I want to give a little bit of time if we have some audience questions, but it's probably the one that folks that are here and listeners are like, how does she handle all of this? And I think that's like common for many small business owners, to your point, not only running the business, but they're human and they have lives. And so I have to ask, how do you balance your role as a mother, entrepreneur, musician, consultant? Like, these are demanding responsibilities. And you talked a little bit about that. Could you, but maybe just go into a little bit tighter about how do you do all this?
Yeah, I think, again, so I said earlier, like, I'm a woman of faith. One, I think there's a grace on me to do it. I think you have to understand where you are supposed to be. And when you are operating where you are supposed to be, even with all of the challenges, it's an ease that comes with it. I think too, when I think over my life, when I think about when it's all said and done, when I'm 120 years old and I go out in my sleep and my hair is cute and I have on my nice outfit, you know, I'm thinking, did I give it all I have? Did I give it all? Did I give it everything that I could? Did I do the things I wanted to do? You know, you'll hear conversations for folks as they matriculate and as they age in life. And it's like, man, I wish I would have done that. You know, I don't ever want to say I wish I would have done it. I want to say I tried it, it didn't work. I didn't like that so much. But there will never be anything that I want to do that I'm not willing to give it my all. You know, I think that that's important for me, how I live my life. And even with, so I have 3 girls and 1 boy. And, you know, there's this thing that parents do, right? It's like, you can do anything you want to do. You can be an astronaut. You can be the next president of the United States. You know, we give them all this courage, but you know, what does that look like for me to tell you that, but I wasn't willing to do it myself? How can I be an example to you? How can I say it out of my mouth, but I wasn't willing to try? So again, it goes back to, I really don't have any true advice to give you because I never personally took the risk, right? So what does that look like to try to tell you that you can do it? So, you know, I think that one of the most important gifts we can give our children is a life well lived. And so, you know, I don't want my daughters or even my son to look at women and mothers who are doing all the things as though you have to become a martyr, right? So a lot of times women are told, like, listen, once you have your baby, once you get your man, now you go and sit down, right? You go sit down somewhere, you know, and I refuse to become a martyr for the things that I love, right? 2 things can exist at the same time. I can do the things that I love to do. I can try new things, and I can also love my family. And I can also show up for my husband. And I can also show up for my friends, right? I think that a part of my personality too, I'm very organized. So project management is a skill. Time management is so important. I have certain days for certain things, and I try to make sure they don't bleed over. You know, I understand my peak times. You know, I like to kind of start at 10, but I love you, so I came at 9 today. But, you know, I understand about 2, 3 o'clock, I kind of start going down, and that's okay, right? And so I think it's really knowing yourself, knowing how you function best, and you operate in that way. But 2 things can exist at the same time, and I think there is a grace. It's sometimes exhausting, absolutely. I was sitting at the table yesterday, and everyone was like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "No, I am exhausted." So every day you're not going to show up, you know, feeling like you know, amazing, you know, but that comes with the territory too. And I think also not getting, you know, discouraged when it's not that easy. Our job is resilience. And if we can learn how to take care of ourselves, understand when it's time to rest, but know you have to push through to get to the other side. Anybody who did anything amazing, it took a certain level of exertion, right? And that's okay, because you're also going to put in there time to rest. You're also going to put in there like, hey, I don't feel like talking to anybody, so I'm not answering the phone. And that you're going to be okay, you know? And so I think, you know, understanding yourself, how you function best. But I think the biggest thing is I'm committed to my story. and I refuse to let anybody else write it for me. So, I don't know. I think I want to become a woodworker next. I want to learn how to like build things. So that might be a new skill. But whatever it is that I feel like I could be, I'm going to try it.
You should all know that we put 3 sugars in Alicia's coffee. So just so everyone knows, there's a hack right there.
Yes, it's called ice cream coffee. It's like,
And you said it was delicious.
it was pretty good.
Yeah, exactly.
You gotta know what you like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're gonna have we've got a few minutes for some Q&A from the audience. So has anyone got a question like to ask Alicia? Don't be shy. Yep.
So what's your favorite, okay. What's the favorite business that you've seen come in? And I know not all will graduate from your space because they don't need a different space, but what's your favorite business that's graduated and gone on to do bigger things?
That's a good question. So I'll say it like this. We have entrepreneurs that have candle companies, marketing companies, we have communication consultants. So it kind of, right now we have a tenant, they just received a grant through the National Institute of Health. And so they're doing a health equity pilot, and they have hundreds of boxes in one of the rooms, and they're taping and shipping out blood pressure monitors all over. So it kind of runs the gamut. I don't really have a favorite one. I think my favorite part about it is being a support system for folks, like being an outlet, being able to talk them through things, encourage them. In our retail space, our boutique owner, I'm talking to her all the time. I'm like, girl, come on, let me shoot your social media content. That's a good angle. Okay, all right, tag me in it. And so, I think my favorite part is being able to support folks and be around them and introduce them to other people and just kind of support the efforts. But we have so many different people do a lot of different things. So, yeah.
Got another question.
Not
Dion.
boring.
And I'm not a plant, but I admire you so much, Alicia, and really adore working with you. My question is, how do businesses find you and find that space to be amongst people that are welcoming them and they feel comfortable in your space?
That's a good question. So Polaris has been open for, it's not even 2 years. It'll be 2 years in August. And so we are constantly working toward how can we talk to more entrepreneurs? How can we be out in the community? How can we utilize our social media channels? I think one of the things we're working on now is creating events that benefit them. Right? So for example, there's an organization called Operation Hope. They do a lot of credit stuff. It's like, well, how does that, business credit, but really a lot of our entrepreneurs want to buy homes, right? So how can we create events and programming that really speaks to the heart of what they want to accomplish? And then 2, I think some of it, again, as we're building, is word of mouth. Because they're like, have you talked to Alicia? She was nice, but also very mean. But she told me that I had 2 weeks to turn this into her. And ironically enough, people are really looking for that. I was talking to someone last night, and she was, talking about how to expand her business. And she was like, I just have to tell you, you told me one thing yesterday, and the next day someone asked me to do it. And so I think it's also the culture that we build. It takes a little time to get that momentum, but when people know that they can go somewhere where they're valued, they're seen, and they're cared for, I think that's kind of our secret sauce as we're building our community and really marketing and getting people to know that there's a space that exists for them.
Awesome. We've got time for one last question. Has anyone got a question? Sherry?
Hey, Sherry.
Well, first of all, again, you were very inspirational and motivational, and I really admire you. But who are your people that walk beside you, and organizationally, how did you get support when you first started?
That's a good question. So one, my grandmother, Maya Angelou. I kid, I'm serious. I'm an avid reader. But I think there were so many people throughout your journey. And, all of us have these touch points with folks. So what's really interesting, right? My mom, when I was younger, she used to do like MLM. So she like you guys remember prepaid legal? You remember when you like paid $20 a month for an attorney? Yeah, that. And so, my mom, she used to had one of those businesses, and I would go to all the conferences with her. I would print the flyers. I would go in the parking lot. I'd be like, hi, ma'am, I'm like 12. Hi, ma'am, do you want an attorney? It's $19.99 a month. And it's like, aren't you supposed to be in school? You know, so my mom, she was very supportive in helping me to develop the ability to communicate and not to be afraid to talk in front of people and articulate what it is that I need. And through working with her, there were mentors in that business. In school, there were so many different mentors and teachers. I was a part of a organization called 21st Century Leaders when I was in high school, and we had mentors and they were taking us places. And so I think it has just been these touch points with people who believed in me. And you know, my science teacher, on all of my progress reports and report cards, they were like, this girl talks extremely too much, right? But they're like, she's so smart though, but she's always interrupting the class. And my science teacher, you know, he was like, hey, we're gonna harness that, because that's a leader in you. Like I'm not gonna see the ISS, you know, I'm gonna harness that. And so there were so many different people that came alongside me. Dion is one of those people. There's a woman named Teray. She is in Teray Dolphin. She's in DC. She works for the Women's Business Council. She was supportive. There's another young woman, Eris. Eris, she works for NARIT. It's like National Real Estate. You know, I wanted to get into some work, and she said, come on, I believe in you, right? And so there were so many women that supported me and saw the potential in me and put me in opportunities to thrive, right? And so I think one of the most important things as well is having the ability and not being afraid to build relationships with folks, right? And I think building solid relationships was really helpful for me. But it was so many different people, and then even the people that don't like me so much, that's okay too, right? You know, I use some of that, so I put it in my coffee, and so yeah.
I think that's a good way to end the show. Talking about coffee, that's great. Thanks so much to the audience for participating in our session today. Thanks to Main Street America for supporting the podcast and allowing us to go out and talk to folks like Alicia and share their stories. They're really so important to the places we all call home. And obviously, a special thanks to our guest, the amazing Alycia Levels-Moore. Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank y'all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
Freaking brilliant.
Thanks for having me, bud. You did so good. You're such a good interviewer.
You guys were great.
Well, you made it.